Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into a 5th grade topic, long division with decimals and rounding. As always, if you have any questions about what you see here today or even your own homework, feel free to put them in the comment box below or visit me on Facebook at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. When you find this video helpful, remember to leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, without further ado, let's jump right into some long division. Before we jump into our question for today, there are a few things I want to go over first. The first one being decimal place value. When dealing with division and decimals and rounding, it's important to know your decimal place values. So, for example, this would be the 10th place. This would be the 100th place. And this would be the 1000th place. And you kind of continue going forward. We need to know and understand decimal place values whenever we're talking about long division, decimals, and rounding. So whenever I'm talking about decimal place value in this video, I'm talking about these numbers after the decimal. So that's the first thing you need to know. The second one is that there is no difference between this and this and this and any of these. It doesn't matter how many zeros come after the decimal, it's all the same. And that's going to be key because whenever we're talking about rounding decimals to the nearest whatever with our division, we're going to be most likely adding these decimal place values. And I don't want you to think that we're changing the question. This is the same as this, it's the same as this, it's the same as this. It doesn't matter how many decimal places you have, as long as they're all 0, it's the same number. Nothing changes except how it looks. And this allows us to get better estimations or better rounding, like to the nearest 10th, hundredths, thousandths, so forth. Having the ability to add more zeros in your decimal place value gives you the option to round to different place values. The third thing I want you to realize is this long division with decimals and rounding is going to look very familiar to the process we use for long division with remainders. The big difference you're going to notice is whenever we talked about long division with remainders, we always stopped right before we got to the decimal values. So we're going to take all those steps and we're going to tweak it so that we don't stop at the remainder, but instead we continue the process until we have the proper decimal place value that we're looking for. I made a video covering long division with remainders, and if you haven't seen it, I'll link it up top. But the steps that I talked about in that video are going to be as follows. So we're going to take these steps and modify it slightly so that we're not stopping at a remainder, but instead going to the place value that we're looking for. So we're still going to do divide first, and then multiply, and then subtract. These 3 don't change. But before we go to pull down, we're going to add one more step where applicable. And I'm going to put some stars around it because this has to be done when applicable. You'll see in our example for today what I mean by that, but has to be done when applicable. And that step is going to be add decimal place value. You'll see what I mean by that, but notice this is one step and it's only when applicable. Then we go to pull down and then repeat. So if we had to number these steps, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you see it's just one more step than what we talked about in my first video on this. Now there is a way that you don't necessarily have to do this 4th step. And that's if you set up your question in such a way where this is unnecessary, then you have all of the same steps. But if you don't have to. And I'll show you what I mean by that as well. But if you don't do that, this is the necessary step that you're going to have to add when applicable. So let's jump into our question for today. So our question for today has us dividing 584 by 6. And if you wanted to avoid this step here, if you want to just kind of stick to the steps you know, then you can technically change this and add your decimals early. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say you want to round to the nearest tenths. Well, then you know you're going to have to look at the hundredths place. So you can change this so that you already have your hundredths place listed. And if you do that, then you can ignore this step here. Same thing as if you had to round to the nearest hundredths. Then you're going to have to add this beforehand, the thousandths place. And if you do that, then you don't have to worry about this step. But I never really do that. I just have my step here, and I just kind of make it a habit of doing what I'm about to show you first. So remember, it doesn't matter how many decimal places you have. If they're all 0, it's all the same value. We can start at 584 and then add them as needed. So we're going to do this rounding to the nearest tenth. And I'm going to show you how we can go from round to the nearest tenth to round to the nearest hundredths. So doing our first step, divide, we have to figure out what we have to divide. So start with this first number. Can we divide 5 by 6? No. So I put a 0 here. And if you saw my first video on long division with remainders, then you notice I like putting the 0 up top. The 0 comes into play a little bit more for decimals than it did for remainders, but it's really good practice to have that 0 there so that when you do need it, it's there, and when you don't, you can just drop it off. So our first step, divide. We said, hey, we can't divide. The closest we can get is 0 because 6 times 0, anything times 0 is going to give you 0, and we don't want to go over that first number. So we divide, then we multiply. 0 times 6, that's going to give you 0. Then we subtract. So just following the steps, right? Subtract 5 minus 0 gives you 5. Add decimal place value when applicable. It's not applicable right now. I would say it's only applicable when you have no more numbers here. We're still at our first value looking at our second value. So there's more numbers to look at. If we don't have any numbers left to look at to our right, then we can add decimal place values as necessary to get to where we're trying to look at for our answer. So for this, we're going to try to find to the nearest tenth. So we need to go to the hundredths. So we're going to be looking a little bit further out, but we don't need to do that right now. So we skip this step, and then we're going to go straight down to pull down. So we pull that down, and then we have 58. Then we repeat. So now we're back up to the top, dividing. So what are we going to divide? 58 by 6. And when you divide 58 by 6, you get a 9, right? So we did divide again. Now we're going to multiply, so it's 6 times 9. And you notice I'm putting my number over where I'm focused on. I'm focused on the 8 right now, so I put my number over the 8. So what's 6 times 9? That's going to be 54. So we multiplied, and now we're going to subtract, right? We're going to subtract, and that's going to be 4. Now, we still have a number we can pull down, so we're not going to add the decimal place value yet. So we're going to skip this step again. Remember, only when applicable. And then we go to pull down. So we're going to put this all the way down. And we got 44 here. And then we're going to repeat. Go back up to the top. We're going to figure out what we need to divide. So 44, we're going to divide that by 6. And what's 44 divided by 6? Well, that's 7. So we divided that. 7 is going to give us our closest response without going over. We don't want to go over 44. So 7 is going to give us the closest number without going over. So what's 6 times 7? Well, that's going to be 42. So we multiplied and now subtract. So we subtracted. And now we would pull down, but there's nothing to pull down. In our previous video, when we're talking about remainders, we would stop here. But because we're trying to round to the nearest tenth, we're not going to stop. We're going to add this extra step here. Add decimal place value when necessary, right? The star means when necessary. And right now it's necessary because we can't get to the nearest tenth without adding some more decimals. So we're going to add a place value. And we always add 0. We don't want to change anything. Remember, I said 584 with 1 decimal, 2, 3, 4, no decimals. It's all the same. So we're going to add a 0 decimal place value and then pull that 0 down. But there's one more thing that you need to know. Whenever you have this decimal here, It is imperative, super important, absolutely necessary to put that decimal right above. Right above. You don't want to miss that. We have to do that. We have to preserve this decimal place here, and we're going to put it right above. So whatever the decimal is here, we have it mirrored up top. Don't forget that. We have to do that. So now we repeat. So we're going to divide. And now we have to divide 20 by 6. So what's 20 divided by 6? Well, the closest we're going to get is 3, right? Without going over, 3 is going to give us our closest answer. So we divide it again. Now we got to multiply. 3 times 6, and that's going to be 18. So we multiply, and now we subtract. And we're going to get 2. So we subtract it. Now, do we have enough to round to the nearest tenth? No, we don't, right? So we add a decimal place value because it's necessary. We're going to do another 0, and then pull that down. So you notice we might have a pattern here, right? This 20, we pull down that 0, and we got another 20. It seems like we're going to keep getting these 3s. I'm running out of space here, but I recommend you do it out and you see that you're going to keep getting this same 3 here. But I'm just going to skip ahead because I know that this is going to give me the same exact stuff that I did before. And you see we're still going to have that 2. But you repeat all your steps. And you notice that, hey, now we have enough up here to round to the nearest tenth. We don't need to go any further. So we can stop. Whenever we're at where we need to be, whenever we have enough decimal places up top to round to the nearest whatever place value we're trying to, we can stop there. Now it looks like our answer is 097.33. But this 0 doesn't really have any meaning in the place that it's at. So we're going to just remove it. We're going to just remove the 0. It doesn't mean anything where it's at. It will have a meaning at some point, but for this one, it doesn't because this is a whole number here and we don't need that 0 up front. So it's really just 97.33. But is that rounded to the nearest tenth? No. We have to look at this hundredth place and determine, is that greater than or equal to 5? No. So because it's not greater than or equal to 5, we're going to round this down, and it's going to be 97.3. Because it's not greater than or equal to 5, we round it down, and it's 97.3. So this is our answer when we round it to the nearest tenth. But let's say we were rounding it to the nearest hundreds. That means we would need one more space, and you just repeat all the steps. And you bring that all the way down, and then you will notice you'll get the same 3. If you did all the math, you get the same 3. So I'm just going to put that there, and you see, hey, now we have this. Rounded to the nearest hundreds, if we wanted to do that, then we would look at this thousands place, and then our answer would be this, because this is still not greater than or equal to 5. So we're going to round it down, so that would be our answer. So you see, you could set this up beforehand, so you don't have to worry about this step. If you know what you're going to round to, you could put all your necessary decimals up front, but it's up to you. It's your preference. So I hope you're able to follow into the example. Remember, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to put them in the comment box below. I'll always be able to help you as much as I can. If you have a question about your own homework like see on this channel, remember to visit me on Facebook at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you haven't done so already, remember to leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your homework, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this is another session of Tutor Me Sempai.